Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this presentation of AgileDad University. My name is Lee Henson, president and founder of AgileDad. We're so glad you could be here with us today. This morning, we would like to cover the Agile Meetings Playbook. Now, a little bit of history before we get into the actual document. I actually created one of these documents back in 2007, so it's been a little while. It's been about 13 years, and I figured it was time for a little polishing and an update. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome all the information that you need in order to successfully implement Agile within your organization. So with that being said, we're excited to present this update. We're excited to answer your questions and to really dig in to show you how you can leverage this book with the intent is and how it can impact your organization. So with no further ado, let's get started. When I think of Agile, one of the first things I think of is it's not a one-size-fits-all red pill, blue pill solution. Agile is intended to be a solution that allows us to be flexible and allows us to embrace things as we see fit as an organization. So the whole idea behind this meeting playbook originally and again today was born as a solution to a growing problem that we saw. And then we see it coming back with a resurgence when it comes to scaling. And that's the bottomless pit that is, sinking valuable time, energy, resources, money, people into meeting attendance, duration, and frequency. So the intent of this guide is going to be to help you eliminate waste and help you focus on having more frequent meetings for a shorter duration with a much smaller audience, and how that can benefit you by spending a lot less time trying to figure out what you should be doing and more time creating innovative solutions for our customers. So there's lots and lots of meat in here, so I don't want to take up too much time with the review. I think the key for us to understand is that this playbook is intended to serve as a definitive reference guide regarding the intricacies around the meetings. It's not intended to be entirely prescriptive. It's not intended to be a directive. It's intended to help, especially leadership and anyone else who has interest in these meetings, to understand Agile meeting frequency, attendance, and details. So while we may not have time to go into every intricacy, my hope is that we'll be able to high-level review every single one of the meetings within our time frame, that we'll be able to have open discussion about those meetings, and that we'll be able to get a much clearer picture of what we're trying to do and how it's impactful and the intent of each meeting. So starting at the top, let's start with organizational vision and strategy. So the key here is that I think this is the one that's most often missing. I see organizations that have a crystal clear vision all the time, but the strategy seems to be fuzzy. It tends to get a little crazy when you start talking about the who, what, where, when, why, and how behind the strategy. Now, in one hand, I've seen organizations spend a truckload of money investing hours into formulating this clear organizational vision and strategy of what they want to do and how they can differentiate their products and services of their company from any other company or competing company that's offering the same thing. The problem becomes that what appears crystal clear to all those who are in the room at the time is anything but crystal clear to the people who are actually doing the work. So it gets lost in translation when it gets down to the actual team level, and the teams tend to not be able to focus or gain focus on exactly what the difference is between their organization and every other organization that's similarly offering products or services. So the goal of this meeting is to achieve a strategic organizational alliance around a clear vision that allows us to press forward and understand exactly what we should be doing. So in order to do this, I broke each meeting down into 3 categories. The first category is inputs and outputs. With regard to input and output, for this meeting, it's often recommended that prior to hosting a session of this type, that you consider a facilitated Agile leadership workshop. Now, this is one of the bread and butter things that AgileDad really does well. We love to meet with C-level executives, with senior leadership teams, and hold Agile leadership summits where we can assess exactly what's going on and make sure that you have a clear idea of why we chose Agile, what problems are we trying to solve, what direction are we trying to take it in, and how can we best benefit your organization, and how you can take away learnings from this session and apply it towards building your own organizational vision and strategy statement. Oftentimes this comes in the form of brainstorming or design thinking. There's lots of methods to get there, but this meeting is not, I want to be clear, formally called out in the Agile framework or the Scrum framework. I would argue that it's incredibly important to do this because without that organizational understanding of the vision and strategy, without the ability to really hone in and focus on what we're trying to do, it makes it really difficult for the teams at the bottom to tie everything together. So while this brainstorming and feedback session should never exceed an hour in duration, speaking of duration and frequency, we want to make sure we have a tangible output in the form of a clear vision and strategy statement. So the statement should be reviewed as needed or either annually, right? So either once a year we take a look at it, or if we feel like we need to make some fine-tuning adjustments, we can look at it then too. The final product's just something that's crisp and easy to understand. And I tend to use the elevator pitch format or press release type format. And we'll get more into that as we go. I also included, interestingly enough, a piece on a podcast that talks about this, where we say, for our target customer who's struggling with this enterprise level problem, our organization is this type of organization. It provides this key benefit, a compelling reason to use our services. Unlike our competitors, we do this different or better. So he sets up a primary key differentiator and sets you up for success right out of the gate. From an attendee perspective, we want to make sure C-level executives are there, obviously, any interested board members, high-level leadership. Optionally, we could have a Scrum Master facilitate this session. Key stakeholders can attend. And eventually, you want to get to a point where you have an all-hands type meeting where everyone who needs to know can receive this message. The key is to keep it small and intimate. We don't want it to turn into something that's big or blown out. We don't want to have too many voices in the room or too many cooks in the kitchen. This is intended to be something that's short and clean and easy to do. And then with each one of these meetings, I took it one step further and included a little grid like this one. Now, this is cool. This shows you each of the 3 key roles in Scrum, the product owner, the Scrum Master, and a team. And across the top, it shows you what their responsibilities should be before the meeting starts, during the meeting, and after the meeting. So for example, here you see the product owner should take time upon being hired by the organization to research and make sure they have an organizational vision and strategy and make sure they have an understanding of what that is so they can better align their product vision and strategy with the organizational vision and strategy. The product owner should then compile a list of key points to get clarification where needed if there's something they don't understand in that organizational vision and strategy, and then process the information and align how those key indicators work specifically with the product or service offering that they're responsible for. So I think there's some keys here, and I think that it's just a means for translating these keys. So the Scrum Master should be prepared to facilitate this meeting as requested. If called upon, the Scrum Master will facilitate the session, obviously, and then they should take the lead in distribution of the Agile press release that declares the organizational vision and strategy, making certain that everyone is involved. Before the meeting, the Scrum team really doesn't have involvement here. During the meeting, the Scrum team's not involved, but after the meeting, the Scrum team should review the Agile press release and formulate questions they could have so that we can make sure those questions make their way back up for clarification as needed. So lots and lots of good information here. But once we do this at the organizational level, we need to repeat the very same thing at the product or service level. So just like the organizational vision and strategy, it's important for us to have a product or service vision and strategy. This product or service vision and strategy extends and should be aligned with the corporate vision and strategy, obviously, but it's the perfect opportunity for a product owner to really focus on limiting the number of products or services or projects in flight at any given time. This is how we enter the conversation about limiting work in progress at the product owner level or at the roadmap level. Because the key here is by reducing work in progress, keeping team sizes normal, and keeping teams together, and allowing those teams to swarm to the products and services to get them done, the ones that yield the best outcome for our target customer, that's the way that we're going to have alignment with the organizational roadmap and with the goals that are contained in a corporate vision and strategy. So this is sort of the glue that holds the organizational vision and strategy and your product vision and strategy together. It's that alignment. This press release that you do at this level lines everything up and allows you to make ultimate finite selection. So here, the inputs and outputs. Obviously, we need the Agile press release from the organizational vision and strategy, and that's going to drive the vision and strategy at the product level. So duration and frequency, once again, we want to keep it under an hour, and it should be once annually or if a new product or service is introduced, or if there's any major updates to the context of the product or service. You want to revisit this vision and strategy and make sure it's right. We want to make sure it's clear, focused, facilitated brainstorming. A lot of people do open workshops. I'm good with that too. I just want it to be clear and to the point, and I want to make sure we have the right voices in the room and the right decision makers in the room. From an attendee perspective, we expect key stakeholders to be there, product owners and a scrum master. Of course, we have some optional participants from leadership, and the teams eventually will make their way in so that they can make sure they're aligned around the product vision and strategy. Once again, small, intimate group, trying to keep things aligned and keeping things critical. From the Scrum Master, product owner, and team member alignment, we want to make sure before this meeting starts that the product owner meets with a team of trusted analysts to best ensure that they thoroughly understand the voice of the customer, the strategic direction the company's trying to make, and the technological feasibility of their proposed product or service. That makes sense. We want to make sure there's alignment across those three. And for any of you who've ever taken an AgileDad workshop before, this is the concept of po ba fa ta. While there's only one product owner ever, it requires a business analyst who understands the voice of the consumer, a functional analyst who understands strategic direction, and a technical analyst who understands architectural capability and the ability for us to build and to successfully complete these type of products from an infrastructure and architecture perspective to help uplift the product owner and keep them informed. The product owner should then verify that they've identified the correct target audience, and that they should be able to explain how enhancements or how the new product will provide whatever key problem it is we're trying to resolve or provide any key benefit. We want to make sure we have focus here. Focus is the key. And then finally, the product owner should focus on having a working press release that's ready to present at a roadmap planning workshop session. So we want to make sure we get that in there. This is going to help them, once again, limit WIP. So if I have multiple different ideas, 5 or 6 different ideas, maybe I'll be asked to consider the top 2 or the top 1 for consideration at road mapping so that everybody has a chance to get something into the roadmap, but that we have a strategically aligned vision with focus on the target consumer so that we can align our focus on outcome instead of output for roadmap consideration. Here, the Scrum Master should be prepared to facilitate the meeting as requested, obviously. And a Scrum Master should also make certain that all the hard meeting room logistics or virtual meeting logistics are in place and in working order. So here they pick up an additional responsibility. The Scrum Master then, of course, facilitates the session and ensures that we're following the recommended time box and focusing on preparing logistically for what comes next in the roadmap session. And then finally, the Scrum Master should take lead in distribution of all the Agile press release information, declaring the vision and strategy for that particular product, and make sure that we have clear visual indicators or creative dashboards that show and align with executive leadership how the vision and strategy for this particular item ties into the vision and strategy organizationally. The team, once again, isn't involved until the end, and that's where they should review the Agile press release, make sure they formulate any questions about any topics that are unclear, and make sure that they align their focus both with the team, the product, the service, and the organization. So lots and lots of good stuff here. Once we have that, then we can go into roadmap planning. Now, this is where many people say the rubber hits the road. Roadmap planning is critical to make certain we're limiting the number of work in progress, the number of projects in a work in progress limit at any given time. We want to focus on outcome that best services our targeted persona. So by this point, we should have identified a targeted persona. We should have our vision and strategy complete. We should have alignment with the corporate vision and strategy. So now it's time to allow our teams to swarm using a logical model. So in some of our training sessions, we talk about a project called the Apple model, where we show how different companies approach the release of different products. And what we illustrate is that by allowing teams to swarm to a limited number of work in progress items, that at the project level even, that they're able to deliver more frequently and more often, thereby allocating a shorter time to market and increased revenue. So the key here is to try to get everyone to work together so that we can have properly released product increment. Typically, this is done quarterly, but it can be done on different levels according to what works best for your organization. My recommendation is at minimum quarterly, and that more often is okay as needed. But we want to have better forecasting within a single product or project or across an entire organization to help us align exactly what's going to hit where in the next 4 quarters of work. So a lot of times, if we just use today as an example, today's June 22nd, if we went through and said, okay, what quarter are we in? We know that now we are in Q3. So we have January, March, April, well, we at the end of Q2, beginning of Q3. So what I would expect to see is Q3, Q4, Q1, Q2. I want to see the next 4 quarters spread out on a roadmap, just like you see here, right? And then I'd like for you to have the ability to also drill down into those so that you can see each of the quarters accordingly and have everything outlined that way and drill all the way down to the story level. Looks like we're starting to get a couple of questions. So I'll try to integrate some of those in, but I want to also remind you that we will have an allocated Q&A time at the end. So someone asked, do we recommend having different individuals for the po, ba, fa, ta roles, or are these shared roles across different teams? Or are they dedicated to a specific team? Good question. While I don't have time to go into all the details of po, ba, fa, ta, what I can tell you is a product owner is dedicated to a product. So it's one product owner, one product. Typically, that product owner has full control over what enters the product backlog, and it is theirs to be had. The business analyst aligns with the product owner. So the PO and the BA have alignment. So there's one business analyst for each product owner. Now, keep in mind, a product owner might have multiple products that they're responsible for. So that means that you could have one product owner and one business analyst who are aligned to each other that align across multiple products. And once again, I want to remind everyone who didn't have an opportunity to attend the roles session that these titles are not necessarily associated to titles that exist in your organization. When I'm talking about a business analyst, I'm talking about someone who understands the voice of the consumer implicitly, who is a full-time responsible person, who provides information to the product owner so they can make key decisions. This person might have a completely different title in your organization, so try not to get hung up on titles. That's something that's incredibly important. The functional analyst and technical analyst, of course, could scale over multiple different groups, and you could have one of those for multiple different products or projects. So this is the one that could scale, but I don't ever recommend them being the same person. If at all possible, I like to have separation, especially between PO and BA. I want to make sure that those two are completely separate people. And that's just because of the workload that they take on, and about the information that's there. Somebody was asking about scaling. Which scaling framework are you introducing here? I'm not specifically going to talk about any one scaling framework. In fact, I encourage you to listen this week. We have a podcast that talks about scaling, and it's going to answer a lot of questions about scaling and about how we feel about it and what's going to work best for organizations. This is really, really good questioning, but I want to remind you that we should hold most of these to the end if possible. So back to quarterly planning, we want to get some alignment. So inputs and outputs. Prior to roadmap planning, it's critical that we have the Agile press release in place at the product or service level. And it's critical that we understand exactly what we're trying to do at this point. So the expectation is that at the conclusion of the meeting, we'll have a clear, concise, and predictable roadmap that outlines by quarter where things should lie and what we should be doing. Makes sense. From a frequency perspective and duration, the roadmap planning session is designed to be held once a quarter, but it could change if necessary. And once again, it should never exceed an hour in length. Typically, my roadmap planning sessions run about 40 to 45 minutes. So just to give you an idea. And this is where the work is introduced by the product owner, what their key initiatives are that they want to work on that quarter. We give them a chance to compare their press releases to the press releases of other product owners. And then we have them align, and we talk about WIP limits and getting things lined up so that we have a pecking order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the team velocity and capacity are brought into consideration before finalizing items to be completed in any quarter. So if we know there's going to be a number of holidays or in Q4, or if we know that there's going to be a time for vacation in the summertime, or whatever the case may be, we make sure that we take those things into consideration when we're loading up the roadmap, because we never want to put too much work in the roadmap. We do want to allocate it and have some type of objective stack rank order, but I don't necessarily want to overload the roadmap with too much information. The more information that we cram into that roadmap, the harder it's going to be for us to discern or to set aside what we should be trying to do, right? From an attendee's perspective, Of course, we want the product owners there, any key stakeholders, business analysts, functional analysts, technical analysts. The Scrum Master should facilitate. The teams, of course, are invited at the end to ratify the roadmap. So when I say ratify the roadmap, this is where the teams can look at it and provide any last-minute technical input. They might discover and say, hey, if we do C before B, we're going to be better off, or whatever the case might be. So this just gives them a chance to have that voice heard. The meeting should once again be kept small and clear, to the point. Any with a key interest to the roadmap output are invited, and teams should ratify the roadmap prior to it being set into motion. So good stuff. And then once we allocate those, then we can do our pre, post, and during. So from the product owner's perspective, they should prepare the Agile press release for each product that they hope to be included in the roadmap, and then actively present each one of their press releases in order to try to get placement in that satisfied rank order. Then each product owner should align with the teams they should align with the teams and or with the analyst group, depending on if their project is selected, to be worked on in the next upcoming quarter. So now if I know that mine's selected next, I'm going to line up with my BAFATA to make sure that I have everything ready for release planning. So I need to start having a backlog item creation session. If I'm not going to have my work done, I'm going to align with other product owners to set things up for a subsequent quarter. So it just makes it easy for us to do the work. From a Scrum Master perspective, they should be prepared to facilitate, and they will facilitate the session as needed, sticking with the time box. Post-meeting, the Scrum Master should take the lead in distribution of the Agile press release regarding and declaring what the roadmap is, the vision and strategy, and the distribution of the roadmap. So this should all be inclusive as one package. So the vision and strategy with the accompanying roadmap. So you're updating the vision and strategy document to include the roadmap to show where this project is going to fall. From the team's perspective, they should be prepared to attend the end of the meeting to ratify the roadmap. They should attend the last 10 to 15 minutes in a meeting to make sure they have any technical questions or technological feasibility questions answered. And then finally, they should review the roadmap post-meeting and plan for the future of the product or services that are going to be built. So they should start brainstorming ideas and just kind of planning in their heads, hey, these are some things that are coming up, and getting their head around upcoming work. So this way it gives you continuous alignment from the team level all the way up. So in essence, I have a name for this. I call this organic scaling. So what ends up happening is you get this organic scaling upward, and you're organizing things based on the work, not based on the individuals, which helps you create T-shaped individuals and teams, so that you never have a team that has incredible depth without having knowledge across the breadth of what they're trying to work on. So good stuff, right? Lots and lots of good information. At which point we discover that our items are going to be worked on next, or our project's going to be worked on next. We should host a backlog item creation workshop. So during this workshop, at the conclusion of roadmap planning, the product owner will evaluate where their product or project falls in a roadmap, invite the BAFATA in, that's business analysts, functional analysts, and technical analysts, into a brainstorming session where they leverage tools such as story mapping or user journey mapping to make sure they understand who the target persona is and how that target persona will best utilize the system or the product or the project that they're building. Once that context is captured, they work together as a group to deliver a well-formed, clearly defined product backlog items, that should be ready to be sized in release planning. Now, the truth is, sometimes items come out of this meeting a little large. Sometimes it's not all inclusive. We should strive to keep items small, but if there are any unknowns, we can't be afraid to do the best we can and to rely on other people to help us successfully break things down. So lots of good information comes out of this meeting. But once again, keep in mind, it doesn't need to be perfect. We had a question regarding acceptance criteria. At this point in the game, I don't even worry about acceptance criteria. Right now, I want them to brainstorm titles, descriptions, context of items, how it might be used. I want to stick with context here, and we can roll acceptance criteria in a little bit later as we start to really spread out and get these items prepared right before the release planning session, or even at the backlog refinement session. Those are both good opportunities to focus on acceptance criteria. So the focus of the product owner and analyst team should be to keep items consistently small if possible, and to avoid creating epics if at all possible. That way we have less work to do when it comes to breaking things down. So we want to keep things short, sweet, and to the point. So inputs and outputs, well, we need that well-refined roadmap with all of our projects aligned by quarter and stack rank order. And then for output, we want to make sure we have a well-defined, concise backlog item, a set of backlog items, a product backlog that are sized correctly and ready to be estimated by the team as part of the rapid release planning workshop. So I do ask that the product owner work closely with the technical analyst to provide an initial estimate on these items that's not seen by the team. Now, the concept here of the product owner providing some type of initial estimate is not new. This is something that's been around since the early days of the tools. So if you were in the early days of version 1, Jira, Rally, any of those tools, Azure, in the early days, they always had a field called initial estimate and a separate field called estimate. And I think that a lot of people didn't know the difference between the two, so they kind of disregarded it and went in at an admin level and oftentimes deleted the initial estimate field or blacked it out. The initial estimate field seemed funky because anytime you put a number in there or you put a size in there and you hit enter, it would disappear. The only person who could see it would be the product owner themselves. And the reason why they did that is because they wanted to empower the product owner to put an initial estimate in there so that later when we talk to the teams about the scope of the work, we wanted to be able to do a real strong comparison between what the initial size of the product owner and the size of the teams, so that if there was a big discrepancy, we could have open discussion about those discrepancies without first revealing the initial product owner's estimate. So there's some good value there. So we want to make sure that if we're not leveraging, that we find a way to leverage initial estimates so that we can stay in line with what we're trying to do there. For duration and frequency, once again, I try to keep every single meeting to an hour or less, but this one is interesting. The duration and frequency of this meeting is at the sole discretion of the product owner. I've had some product owners that like to do this in a marathon session for a couple hours one time with the BAFATA. I have other product owners that like to spread it out over a 6-week period for 1 hour, 3 times a week type session. There's no definitive, it must be presented this way. It really is based on the availability of the people involved and is held strictly at the discretion of the product owner. So I think between those two, it's important for us to get alignment and to understand what's going to work best for you organizationally, for the product owner and from their perspective, as well as for the teams that are going to be involved, the BAFATA. And from their perspective, the goal, of course, is to have a real clear backlog, or at least a set of backlog items to start with that's going to help us into our journey of creating the remaining backlog items if we have any uncertainty. From an attendee's perspective, of course, the product owner needs to be there. It's their workshop. The business analyst represents the voice of the consumer. Functional analyst represents the strategic best interest of the organization. The technical analyst represents the development best interest. And key stakeholders are present to make sure that we're not deviating or going off task. From the optional participants package, we have the Scrum Master to facilitate. They don't have to be there, but it works a lot smoother if they are. Any other analyst is defined by the project. So when I say any other analyst, maybe you have someone who is a support analyst, or maybe you have someone who is a marketing analyst. If they need to be there in order to make your product successful, then it's at the discretion of the product owner to invite those individuals for clarity as needed so that we can make sure we have good focus during this meeting. The meeting, once again, should be small and intimate. It should be a lightweight group. With concise backlog items, and we want to make sure that we have everything ready to be estimated by the team. We want to make sure that they're just totally engaged and ready to go at the rapid release planning workshop. So before this meeting starts, we want to make sure that the product owner meets with the business, functional, and technical analysts to align the frequency and duration in which they plan to meet to create and refine the backlog items. Then we want the product owner to work closely with each of the analysts to discuss the needs of the consumer, the organizational strategic direction, and the feasibility from a technical perspective for each backlog item that they've created. And then finally, we want the product owner to work with the analyst to refine each backlog item so it has a clear title and description. It'll be easy to consume in a rapid release planning session. And we can begin to formulate some acceptance criteria at this point to make sure that we have a clear understanding of the scope of these items. For the Scrum Master, they should be prepared to facilitate this meeting as requested, obviously, and they'll assist with removal of any logistical related impediments or coordinating events. The Scrum Master always facilitates this workshop when called upon, and the Scrum Master will carefully time box to make sure that we're keeping the meeting short, focused, and to meet their intended objective. The Scrum Master will work closely with the product owner after to assist with any bandwidth related issues with the analyst, or to assist with their own bandwidth to help refine the items prior to the rapid release planning session. Now the team, they get involved in the end where they review the backlog item candidates prior to the rapid release planning session so that they're ready to give accurate estimates. So they do a quick review of the items prior to them entering the rapid release planning session. Next is rapid release planning. Now, this, in my opinion, could be one of the most critical meetings that we have. It's important for us to see this through all the way to the end. This literally is the glue that holds all the planning together. Many organizations struggle from using time-based estimation practices. If you were in our last webinar, we talked extensively about that. It is available for viewing if you weren't there on the AgileDad YouTube channel and on agiledad.com. So go back and view that if you have any questions about estimates and time-based. But our goal should be to eliminate time-based estimates if possible. So rapid release planning allows us to focus on the size of a job instead of how long it's going to take to complete as an individual or group. And that gives you greater confidence in the estimates and allows for much more accurate forecasting. We can get up to 85% accuracy in our forecasting this way. So teams are encouraged to swarm and engage, to size work very quickly and discuss any outliers with the product owners in a separate discussion session. And the planning session replaces all other estimation workshops. So if you're doing planning poker, other estimation workshops, or you're going through each item one by one, this is designed to replace that. This is designed to stand in place of those other estimation workshops. What we found is that gut check estimation works best. So quickly, to steal from the last webinar, if I asked you for a gut check estimation, why gut check? Why does it need to be so fast? Why are we so desperate to get quick? And I'm not asking you for an estimate regarding time. I'm asking you for a size. How big is it? Using t-shirt sizes, extra small, small, medium, large, extra large. If I ask that question, it's kind of like taking a test. If you've ever taken a history test, a science test, a math test, whatever test you've taken, they always tell you your gut instinct is usually right. So this is getting that gut instinct without trying to talk yourself out of it or put too much attention to detail in there so that you can remain focused and really engage with the people who are going to be responsible for, sizing and getting everything straight. And there's always room for answering clarifying questions in subsequent backlog refinement sessions that come up after this meeting. So the intent of the meeting is to get the initial size. Inputs, well, you can't do it without a well-prepared backlog. So this places emphasis on step 4 of the AgileDad 12-step program, 3 and 4, about making sure we have a clear understanding of who should be doing this and how the backlog should be organized. It's good to have things small and tidy, and it's good to have things well-refined. If you have things well-refined and small and tidy, you're good to go. The expectation at the end of this meeting is that all backlog items that are being considered for an upcoming project will be defined pretty good, and that the product owner and the team will both have a chance to come into agreement with regard to the size and the scope. So this is where we're getting t-shirt sizes on our items. This meeting is often referred to as PI planning, or product increment planning, or big room planning if you're doing any of the Agile frameworks, the scaling. But this is where it ties together, right? So from a duration and frequency perspective, this is going to shock you, but should never exceed an hour again. I had an opportunity to do this for a very large software company, and they had about 511 items. I don't recommend doing that many, but they had about 511 items, and we had just under 100 people in a room, and we're still able to complete this in 58 to 59 minutes, and in the end, still had about 80 to 85% accuracy, which is really good. So with that being said, we want to consistently hit that 85% accuracy mark if we can, because that's going to allow for better forecasting. So this session should be held once a quarter, or as new products or projects are being introduced that require estimates to be made, or broken down according to your release cycle. So if you're releasing more frequently, this meeting might happen more frequently. If you were releasing every 2 weeks, this would be your sprint planning. If you were doing continuous integration, you wouldn't be doing rapid release planning. So it's just one of those things that you have to have a clear understanding that this aligns with the scope of how you're doing Agile in your organization. So it's not, once again, prescriptive. It aligns with the way that you are flowing information out to your end consumers. So mandatory participants include the product owner, all Scrum teams, the Scrum Master. Optional participants, we have stakeholders, of course, business analysts, functional analysts, technical analysts, and any other interested party. This is designed for the team. So I want to be careful here. So this meeting is really scoped out for the team or teams that are going to be working on a particular item to get their head around the scope of the work and to get it sized accordingly. So it should include all of the teams that could potentially be working on this. So if there's multiple teams, get them all in a room. This is going to help them align on a baseline size for small so that you don't have estimates that are all over the place. So this is going to help you get that baseline small estimate. And all product owners that have items being considered should also be present. So for some reason, excuse me, we're quantifying or working on multiple different product owners' work. If we're wrapping up one project and kicking off a new one, we might have multiple product owners in this meeting, which is totally fine. We want to try to keep it one product owner and product focused, but if we need to expand, we can. So this is, once again, the flexibility. And I think that that's where, when we start talking about scaling, which was the question we had earlier, the thing that I dislike about scaling the most in most of the arrangements is that there's too much rigidity, right? It's too structured. I enjoy the fact that this allows you flexibility, but still allows you to scale. So my key here is, with flexibility comes scaling. With great power comes great responsibility. We want to pair those together, right? And from the participant's perspective, pre-meeting, the product owner should have all the items well-defined and ready to go. They should be t-shirt sized, initial estimated by the product owner. The product owner should present the backlog items for review and be available to have short time box discussions around any items where there's a large disparity between a team's estimate and the product owner's initial estimate. The product owner should take the newly estimated items, place them into mock sprints, and get a good idea for forecasting of which items are going to, which items we can finish all of these, some of these, and none of these. They can forecast out and see what should be completed based on the team's velocity, if we have an average velocity for the team. The Scrum Master should be prepared to facilitate, obviously, and they should also make certain everything's logistically prepared for this meeting, since it requires a lot of logistics to get it running correctly. The Scrum Master then will facilitate the session and make certain we honor the team agreement to stick to the prescribed step-by-step time box. So this has some very specific steps. There's more about rapid release planning available on the AgileDad website. There are 17 distinct steps, and it sounds like a lot, but some of the steps are very simple. Gather around a table. Find a small item. So you have to keep in mind that these steps are small and concise, but they should be included. And this is the one time where I'd say being prescriptive is okay. To follow those steps in order and to engage in that way is going to allow this meeting to flow and to get you the information that you need. So in the end, the Scrum Master assists the product owner in clarifying outstanding items and helps them prepare the backlog to be refined and consumed at sprint planning. So this is where we're preparing for backlog grooming or refinement, and then ultimately preparing for sprint planning. So the team should review the candidate backlog items prior to the meeting to make sure they understand what they're about to estimate. The teams work quickly to place a t-shirt size estimate on every item. It goes very, very quickly. We have a short discussion about any items where there's huge discrepancies in size or scope. And finally, the team should be prepared to meet with the PO to better refine each of these items and to help identify and ratify clear acceptance criteria and make sure they have a good understanding of the definition of done. That's post this meeting. So I wanted to make sure you understood that those things happen after rapid release planning. We can begin before rapid release planning starts, but the primary focus here is going to be after rapid release planning finishes. So the next meeting then is product backlog refinement. And this is where each team is required to spend 1 hour per week with the product owner to assist them in refining the product backlog. Now, many people call this product backlog grooming. I choose to use the word refinement over grooming. It's potato, right? Whichever you prefer. Activities could include breaking down larger epics into smaller backlog items, refining the acceptance criteria, which is the key thing I want to happen here, breaking work down into small tasks to be better prepared for sprint planning, or any other duties that the product owner might need. If new work comes in, they may ask you to provide some new estimates. If they need some scope adjusted, they might ask you to help them adjusting scope. If they need to get their head better around the acceptance criteria of an item, they might ask the team to really help assist them in figuring these things out. So the purpose of this session is to help the Scrum team be in better alignment with the product owner and to better understand the product backlog. So once again, it's all about focus and dedicating that focus. So from an inputs outputs perspective, we need well-defined t-shirt size backlog items that are right-sized and ready for refinement. Makes sense. You don't want a whole bunch of epics. The item should have clear acceptance criteria in the end. And when possible, they should be broken down into tasks as needed. So that way they're ready to be slotted into sprint planning. So the product owner should work very closely with each team to make certain there's zero ambiguity and that each team has a clear set of acceptance criteria and is ready to have each item enter into sprint planning. where it'll be allocated over a 2-week delivery slot and completed as requested. And that's assuming you're doing 2-week sprints, right? Duration and frequency, each team should spend 1 hour per week with the product owner. It's important that it's an hour per week. I don't want it to be longer than that. I think that's plenty of time for the product owner to work with the team to have a crystal clear understanding of what's going to be consumed in sprint planning. So the refinement session serves as the final preparation prior to the team taking the item into a given sprint. So it's held weekly, and each team and product owner get together, and it's strictly time boxed, never to exceed an hour. So it's critical to get the teams out of the meeting and get them back to work. We don't want them to feel like they're in meeting overload. So here the mandatory participants are the product owner and the scrum team. Optionally, the scrum master can facilitate as needed, and either analysts or stakeholders are welcome to attend on an as needed basis. The meeting should be very small, intimate, and it should be used to just put the final touches on each backlog item so that it can be allocated to a sprint and make sure it's in good working order. So from the pre-meeting, during meeting, and post-meeting perspective, the PO makes certain each backlog item has been carefully reviewed with the analyst team and is prepared to be sized in rapid release planning. During the meeting, the product owner works with each team to clarify the finer details of the item if necessary, and they work together to define and refine acceptance criteria as permitted each time during this meeting. So it's a good time for them to really work on that if possible. Post-meeting, the product owner does a final evaluation of each item to make sure it's ready to enter the sprint. And if they have any questions, they can pull the team together, even after a daily stand-up if needed, to get some fine-tuning clarification. Scrum Master should be prepared to facilitate this meeting as requested, and they will coordinate logistics, of course, and provide support in any way they can for the backlog refinement. The Scrum Master will facilitate the session and stick to the strict 1 hour time box as requested. They will note any impediments and run down any additional information as requested. So a lot of times the team will say, oh, we need to know this or we need to know that. It's a good opportunity for the Scrum Master to go and chase those things down and get that information during this meeting. After this meeting's over, the Scrum Master works with the product owner and the Scrum team to make certain any final impediments are taken care of so that the work can be completed in an announced upcoming sprint. Then the team, of course, should review the product backlog and be prepared to help the product owner better define each item. The Scrum team works closely with the product owner to refine each item so they can break it down into consumable tasks in preparation for the work to be done in an entering sprint. And then the Scrum team gets back to work. After this meeting, they should be working. So they get back to work on items that are in their current sprint, and they look forward to an upcoming sprint while they'll be working on items that they've just refined. So now they have an idea of what items are coming up. So it's really cool because this closes the door and closes the deal so that the team sees exactly what's going on. And then when they enter sprint planning, it all makes sense. So sprint planning is the culminating event of the Scrum framework. This is the event where the team commits to completing the work that they have seen, and this pulls together all the prior planning and is the final checkpoint before the work physically gets done. I think about this like the SpaceX launch. This is when the astronauts go through the tunnel into the actual aircraft or spacecraft. This is where, this is the final countdown, right? This is where the rubber really hits the road and the team gets to actually do the work. This is the exciting part. So I call it the lifeblood. This event is the lifeblood of what makes Scrum or Agile so special. This is the final opportunity to do the inspect and adapt prior to the work being set in motion. This short yet productive meeting serves as a conduit for the workload responsibility to shift from product ownership to the actual team that's going to be doing the work. So that's what's so awesome. This is where you get that shift. So from an inputs and outputs perspective, it's important that a well-refined product backlog is there, that it's all been broken down into tasks, that it's ready for consumption, and it has clear acceptance criteria. From an output perspective, work should be aligned into a sprint cycle, and completed work, of course, is generated output. Sprint planning really is the conduit for the team to take control and to make sure they have a good understanding of what the work is and dive in and get it done. So this session should never exceed an hour. For most sprint planning sessions for a 2-week sprint, I usually say they take about 40 minutes, anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes. 40 minutes is usually on the long side, but this should be a very quick meeting if you have all these other meetings in place. And by the time the work reaches sprint planning, it should be small in size, well-defined with clear acceptance criteria. This isn't a time to do thorough refinement in a large Q&A session. The session is designed to help the team see how much work is expected of them for the time period to accept the work into the sprint and align everything with the agreed upon cycle of 1 to 4 weeks. So 2 weeks is the most common, but it doesn't mean that you have to stick with 2 weeks. If your organization chooses to do all 1 week sprints or all 4 week sprints, that's fine. I just want it to be something that we agree upon and that the work lines up with the sprint duration. Oh, I'm sorry, and then attendees. I almost forgot. So mandatory participants, product owner and scrum team, and a scrum master. Optionally, we could have stakeholders, business analysts, functional analysts, and technical analysts present. It's just conducted with each team individually. So each team individually has their own sprint planning session to validate the velocity of what their team is to the number of points that are being included in the sprint, and to make sure they're not exceeding any individual's capacity to sign up for the work. Because if someone's going on vacation or something's happening, or if there's a holiday, we want to make sure that we didn't forget that information, so we don't have the team signing up for work that they can't necessarily complete. So we want to make sure we have alignment there. For the product owner, they should have projected work aligned into a sprint cycle, not to exceed the team's velocity. Then they should actively provide any last-minute clarifications regarding the work that's about to be completed with the acceptance criteria, etc. The work should be refined and small and ready to be consumed by the team. The product owner after should make themselves available to the team throughout the sprint cycle and should begin preparation for their next sprint planning meeting, for their next refinement session. The Scrum Master should be prepared to facilitate the meeting as requested, as always, and the Scrum Master will facilitate the session to make sure we honor the team agreement and stick to the 60-minute max time box. The Scrum Master should help the team manage their commitment and do anything they can to uplift and empower the team to facilitate sprint completion. And then finally, the Scrum team should review the items and ensure they're ready to be consumed during the next sprint. The Scrum team should review the proposed sprint work, ask clarifying questions, accept and commit to completing the work. And then the Scrum team should begin actually working on the sprint backlog and getting things done. This is where it gets exciting. This is where we get everything done. Each day, we have our daily stand-up. The daily stand-up is the most critical and most misunderstood of all Agile meetings. While keeping up with status is critical, this meeting, like the retrospective, is owned by the team. It belongs to the team. This is a chance to practice team-enforced accountability. If you want to read more about that, we have an excellent blog post from a guest blogger regarding what team-enforced accountability is. But this is an opportunity for the team to hold each other in check and make sure that they're doing the work that they've committed to, and build trust between the team and the organization, and trust between the team and the product owner. This meeting should be laser-focused and deliver a solid accountability report for each person that's on the team. This meeting can also be leveraged to identify and resolve outstanding issues. And as long as this meeting is kept short, small in size, and relevant, this meeting will best help keep teams and organizations on task. So this is the one that kind of keeps everything in line. This is that linchpin that just kind of holds everything together. So inputs and outputs, individual accountability, and the ability to report on completed work from the prior day, the ability to commit to what work you intend to complete today, and the desire to help resolve any impediment that could be preventing work from moving forward for yourself or for the team is your input. Outputs, a committed plan that's easily understood and adds value to the sprint goal of what you're going to do. And then finally, the team is, this daily team meeting is designed to be a very fast checkpoint that allows teams to gain insight regarding their work for that day and regarding accountability across the team to make sure everyone's focused. Duration of the meeting is 30 seconds per person, not to exceed 15 minutes. Wow, that makes it fast. And the total time should be 15 minutes for the meeting, and that includes any afterthoughts. The meeting should take place daily, with the exception of the sprint planning day, obviously, which you wouldn't have the meeting. But in this meeting, we address 3 questions. Did you complete all the work that you committed to complete yesterday? If not, what happened? 2, what do you commit to complete today? And 3, if you have any impediments that remain outstanding, this is the time to address them. While the meeting is not focused on problem solving, it's definitely important to address any outstanding concerns that still need attention. So we don't want to make this meeting all about impediments and figuring out impediments. But if there are outstanding impediments, this is a great time to have the discussion. This is a great time to talk about them. But if an impediment does arise, we encourage you to contact both the Scrum Master and the product owner right away, and not wait until the next sprint or the next daily stand-up to have that discussion, right? So pre-meeting, the product owner should review any outstanding impediments from the previous workday and be prepared to report on any updates or resolution status. The product owner should listen and report immediately. To listen to any reports and immediately address any questions or concerns that come into focus as a result of the daily update. And then finally, the product owner should work with the teams to address any outstanding questions or issues and prepares for the next day of work. The Scrum Master should be prepared to facilitate this meeting. This is the bread and butter. The Scrum Master reviews any impediments that remain outstanding and works with the team to resolve issues prior to the meeting. So we don't want to carry all these issues into the meeting if possible. The Scrum Master facilitates the workshop and reminds all in attendance of the goal for the meeting. They will allow the team to control the flow and report/commit to upcoming work, and they will assist as needed or called upon. After this meeting, the Scrum Master will monitor team progress, work to assist the team with impediment removal, and do anything possible to help the team successfully complete the work allocated for that day. So they need to go out of their way to do anything they can to help them be successful. The Scrum team should be prepared to report what they worked on and whether or not they'll meet their commitment for the prior day. Then they'll report on their completed work, forecast what's going to be completed for the day, and work to resolve any outstanding issues or help resolve issues for others. And then finally, the team should focus on work for the day and all they can do to deliver that potentially shippable product increment at the end of the sprint. So as soon as the sprint's over, we have 3 more steps. The internal sprint review is intended to be an exclusive meeting between a team and a product owner in preparation for a public demo. In this meeting, we ensure that all the acceptance criteria has been met and that the product is actually ready for public demo. This is a fail-safe mechanism in order to maintain short and relevant public demos. We don't want to demo everything if we don't have to. And it's important for us to get our head around and for the product owner to see and give feedback regarding the product or service in its current state prior to giving or revealing all the new features to the general public. The audience for the demo can be fine-tuned based on the findings and based on the things that were discovered in the internal review. So sometimes you might want to fine-tune what you're going to show or who's going to be there based on the audience, which is really a cool concept. So obviously you need to have completed sprint work ready to be presented to the product owner or any other interested stakeholders. You need to have, as an output, presented work will be validated to make certain it meets acceptance criteria and it's ready for the demo. And then while this meeting is not one of the core Scrum meetings again, it is vitally important to make sure that we're ready for the demo and have everything lined up to showcase. Duration and frequency. Internal review should never exceed an hour. Typically, this is a dry walkthrough. It takes about 30 to 40 minutes. It's not intended to be a long meeting. It should be held once per sprint prior to a public demo. And then it's critical that as a result of this meeting, we do not try to completely reinvent what we built. So if we discover there needs to be some modifications or it didn't meet the acceptance criteria, fine tuning is perfectly acceptable, but the purpose of the meeting is to prepare for a crisp, precise demo, not to redo our work. So we want to make sure that we understand that, if we have discovery in this meeting, that we're not going to, dedicate that discovery and try to reinvent things at this time. It's just too late at this point. We'll determine what's going to be in the demo and display the public demo. Attendees, mandatory participants should include the product owner, Scrum team, and Scrum Master. Optionally, of course, the meeting should have everything that, there's no optional participants. Anyone's invited. So this meeting should be everything that we need as a team or group of teams for a joint demo to prepare for what will be displayed and validated both for internal and external stakeholders. Having proper reviews helps the PO and the BA over time identify other target audiences for the demo and certain products and services and associated features so that we can make sure we have alignment with what we should be doing. So a question came about Scrum Masters working on multiple projects. If yes, how is focus preserved? So I never align Scrum Masters with a product or project. I align Scrum Masters with teams. So I say based on the level of skill that a Scrum Master has, a Scrum Master could be eligible to work with 1, 2, or 3 teams. If they're a brand new Scrum Master, it's usually 1 Scrum Master and 1 team until they get the handle of how to do their responsibility as a Scrum Master. Then it can graduate and work with 2 teams and 3 teams. And then the teams, of course, focus on work. And ideally, the teams would focus on 1 product or project. But in some cases, they're scaled across multiple, in which case the Scrum Master would scale with them. The benefit there is that team members only have to build a relationship with 1 Scrum Master. And then product owners could have multiple Scrum Masters at their disposal to answer those questions for them. So once again, great question. I love some of these questions that are coming in and I appreciate it. So good stuff. So from a pre, during, and post, the internal review, the product owner should be prepared with acceptance criteria and should reserve a place for the team to show them what they built. The product owner should actively ask questions regarding the new functionality and give final sign-off for any items that were not presented to them during the planned sprint. And then finally, the product owner should have, by this point, invited others to the demo with a clear agenda and list of what will be presented by the team during the demo. The Scrum Master should be prepared to speak as a voice of the team and help the team align expectations for a powerful demo. The Scrum Master facilitates the session and makes certain we honor a 60-minute total time box. It should never take all 60. And then the Scrum Master will run any last-minute logistics in preparation for a clear and concise product or service demo. The team should have all completed work in line and allocated with the acceptance criteria and should be prepared to show the work to an external audience as requested. The Scrum team should show their work to the product owner who will validate acceptance criteria and alert the team of any last-minute changes or tweaks that need to be made. And then the team should at this point be prepared to do a live demo to the internals or external stakeholders accordingly, which leads us to the public demo. This is the perfect opportunity for the team to showcase what they've done and to get excited about what's been completed in the sprint. Different types of product demos are offered based on different groups that are going to be monitoring or looking at the work. So the expected audience to review the completed work changes the scope of how the demo is presented. The purpose of the demo is to align stakeholder and end consumer wishes to the product or service with which they're building. This also serves as a great time to realign on budget, cost, timeline, new or existing features. All interested parties are welcome to come to the demo, and we should always, always, always remember to do a Q&A portion following the demo. So we want to make sure we open it up. Inputs and outputs, completed sprint work that's met all acceptance criteria and has been validated by the product owner should be part of the demo. A clear illustrated demo of all the features and functionality should be completed by the team during this time. That's pretty easy. The meeting is also a great time for the product owner related analysts to assess the future of the product and to align with key stakeholders at the conclusion of the demo to make sure they've got everything squared away. Duration of this is never to exceed 1 hour. Go figure. I try to keep these meetings short. And the frequency is once per sprint, directly following the internal review. So the product owner should be able to help gear the demo to appeal to the correct audience based on what features are being presented. And each demo could have a different audience and could showcase a different part of the product. So it's okay to vary the demo based on who the audience is, what part of the product we're working on, and what the needs are. But you should gather early and frequent feedback regarding the status of the items being built so that you can align it correctly with the right expectations. So mandatory participants are the product owner, business analyst, functional analyst, technical analyst, stakeholders, Scrum Master, and Scrum team. And then optional are any other invited participants. So we want to make sure they're all there. The meeting should be kept relatively small in size. We don't want to go overboard. And we want to give the team a sense of accomplishment and applaud them on their achievements and provide the product owner with critical information from stakeholders so that they can make better decisions for the product going forward. So this is kind of the big piece that pulls it all together. And from a pre-meeting perspective, the PO should have validated during a review what items were actually ready for demo. At this point, they should be inviting the correct interested parties to the working demo. Once the demo starts, the product owner works closely with each team member to present the work, capture the appropriate feedback, and a product owner should perform the demo kickoff and present the team to participate and actively do the demo. The product owner consults with all stakeholders, discusses any outstanding questions regarding budget, timeline, additional features, etc. The Scrum Master should coordinate all hard logistics for the demo, make sure we have everything in line and ready to go for a successful demo, and the Scrum Master facilitates the workshop. Now, they also help with crowd control, which is interesting. So their job is to hold all questions until the end to make certain that the feedback is constructive and worthwhile to the team and the product owner. And then finally, the Scrum Master will take the team to a separate area to prepare for their retrospective. It's critical for the team to have everything ready to go to have a great working discussion. So they want to make sure they have a good relationship thing going on here. From a pre-meeting perspective, the team, make sure they have everything done, but make sure they've done a demo walkthrough and that they're prepared to demo the features to a group of interested stakeholders. The team performs the demo based on the features that have been selected and approved by the product owner, and they present those features to the audience. And then the team should review the demo and prepare to discuss opportunities for the team and process improvements for the retrospective. So there's lots of things happening here. But I think finally, the culminating event, the last event that happens is the retrospective. The team retrospective is by far what I consider the most sacred of all Scrum ceremonies. This meeting serves as a point where the team can check in with others to celebrate success, identify what areas they can set for a goal for improvement. This is where we do our best to keep everyone upbeat, keep this meeting uplifting and exciting. If the subject matter of the meeting becomes entirely negative, the usefulness of the meeting greatly diminishes. So the key to making this meeting successful is by keeping hyper relevant to the team during doing the work and making the goals achievable and never forgetting to celebrate success and collaboration. So you want to make sure you got real good focus here. So inputs and outputs, we want the team to come prepared to present findings from the last sprint that should be prepared and have open and honest discussion regarding the sprint goal and how they perform compared to what was expected of them. From an output perspective, the team for this meeting, the output for this meeting is that the tangible team sprint goal should be addressed in the next sprint, and meaningful communication takes place to help the team grow and improve their quest for organizational agility. I put a note here that you shouldn't be taking notes or minutes in this meeting. There should be no tangible output that goes to be discussed or read by anyone outside of the group that's in the meeting. Duration and frequency. The retrospective is the only Agile meeting that I let flow without a strict time box in place. As long as the meeting is being productive, I let the meeting continue. So I want to allow enough time for the team to have candid conversation regarding their current state, areas of improvement. And, as long as they're being productive, I'm good. I'll let the conversation flow. I've seen some of these go as little as 15 minutes. I've seen a retrospective last 2.5 hours. The retrospective is just held at the end of each sprint, and it's required before the beginning of the next sprint planning session. So this gives the team an opportunity to enhance cooperation amongst themselves and communication for upcoming sprints, and to make sure they have all the loose ends tied together so they know what they should be doing. From an attendee's perspective, the mandatory participants, of course, are a Scrum team, a single third-party objective facilitator. This is most often a Scrum Master, but doesn't necessarily need to be. I've had times where someone else facilitates the session. Optional participants are product owner for a short time box allowance. Interesting. So I know that most Scrum recommends no product owner. Here I say that if the product owner wants to poke their head in for a time box allotment of 5 minutes or 10 minutes and just say, hey, I want to congratulate you all. The stakeholder said you did a bang up job in a demo. Did you have anything for me? I want to give the team a chance to express their concerns or issues or comments to the product owner regarding product ownership. But I don't believe that the product owner should be in the entire meeting monopolizing it. This is for the team, right? So this meeting is owned and governed by the team. It is strictly their meeting. They have the option to invite the product owner for a short time to discuss how to better work together. In the end, however, the meeting is intended to focus on team improvement and how the team works. So pre-meeting, we have the product owner that should be focused and in the sprint review prior to this meeting, reviewing timeline, budget, new features, enhancements for upcoming sprints. The product owner should attend the session if invited by the team and should time box themselves to a 10-minute window. And the product owner should be preparing the product backlog and doing any fine tuning prior to the next sprint planning session. The Scrum Master most often is preparing to facilitate this session for the team and preparing the best method to enhance communications. So the Scrum Master in most cases facilitates the workshop unless asked not to facilitate by the team. And it's important for the Scrum Master to be preparing to facilitate the next sprint planning session, and should be present. It should be present and available to complete the team goal for the product owner. The Scrum team should be prepared to attend and actively participate in discussion regarding process improvement and team communication. And the Scrum team should attend this session and have open discussion. In this session, they celebrate success, address concerns, set meaningful, achievable goals, and improvement for the team. The Scrum team should review items allocated for the next sprint and be prepared to enter the next sprint planning session. So this is kind of the glue that holds it all together. So I had a question regarding notes or minutes. It says, since no notes or meetings should be taken during a meeting, retro, if there are notes for improvements, good question. So if there's a note for improvement, like a sprint goal, that's something that should be captured and should be placed as a 0-point backlog item into the next sprint. When I said no notes or minutes, I meant no external notes or minutes for anyone outside of the meeting. So as long as the people inside of the meeting are in agreement that this note should be something that's allocated as a goal, we should certainly capture those. I just meant no one outside of the team. So good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. So lots of information here. That concludes the major part of the presentation, but I did want to invite a couple of questions because I know I saw a few questions that were floating around. So if any of you have questions, this is a great time for you to throw in your questions. So I have one here. It says, the Scrum team is often described as the product owner, Scrum Master, and Dev team. Are you using the term Scrum team to mean Dev team during this presentation? This is another one of those hangups over titles again. So when I say Scrum team, I'm talking about the active Scrum team, the participants. I don't like to necessarily say Dev team because if you're not building a software product, they might not be called a Dev team. They might be called something else, like a product team or a service team. So I just use Scrum team loosely. But you are correct. In many cases, the Scrum team does refer, according to the Scrum Guide, to all three of those. So in my case, I say the Scrum team, or I will say, and this kind of throws, it makes more sense. If I say the Agile team, I'm talking about the greater Agile team. So I'm talking about everybody. If I say the Scrum team, I'm talking about the Scrum team specifically. So I want to make sure I hammer it out that way. Let's see. It seems the product owner is the boss of the project manager. No. The number of meetings, length, invitations, et cetera, the product owner's discretion. Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. So somebody had a question regarding the role of the product owner versus the role of a project manager, it sounds here. It's a long question, so I'm shortening it a little bit. I hope I captured the context. The product owner is responsible for aligning when the meetings occur, for extending invitations, and for making certain that they stay focused on what is part of the sprint goal. But their primary job is to maintain their backlog. In no way is the product owner ever considered a manager. The product owner does manage their product, but the product owner should never manage the process. So great question. Let's see. We had one more. Retro notes for improvement. Can that be shared with the release train engineer? Good question. So someone doing SAFe asked that question. Absolutely. So if there are any notes for improvement, I absolutely believe that notes for improvement, any type of process enhancement or facilitation notes that we're setting as a goal for upcoming release train, for upcoming sprints, absolutely that should be shared. What I'm trying to focus on here is in no way do I want someone taking candid notes about everything that's being said in the meeting, putting together a list of minutes and sending it to leadership. That's definitely out of the question. I think those are two separate things. So lots and lots of rich questions here. It appears that we have some longer ones. So I'm going to take these longer questions offline because I don't want to hold the rest of you up. And I'll make sure that I answer these via email. So on behalf of AgileDad and on behalf of the entire team, we want to say thank you for being here. We had several hundred people here again this time. So we love being able to engage with each of you. We do have some more upcoming additional free webinars that we'd love to encourage you to attend. And like I said, on behalf of the whole group, we can't say thank you enough. So we want to make sure we encourage you to stay strong, stay healthy, stay agile. And until next time, take care, my friends.